Cam, good morning.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Appreciate you waking up and doing this thing with me.
Yeah, no problem. I'm happy to be here.
Cam, so you've done a lot of things. You've written a lot of pieces of work and done some other really interesting things. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what you've been up to over the last handful of years? And then I'd love to go back and kind of figure out how you got into this thing.
Okay, cool. So, my name is Kam Knight. I'm a mentor, international speaker, and author of a dozen books in the area of mental, physical, and emotional performance. And as far back as I can remember, I've been a fairly driven individual. It's hard not to be living in this culture where there's so much personal development content, including podcasts like this. I've always wanted to do more, have more, and achieve more in life. And although I've had my fair share of success, I always felt like the success was much harder or more stressful than it needed to be.
Mm,
And I wondered why that was. Like, why is it if I want to do something, I know what to do, I know how to do it, and I have the motivation and desire to do it, but for one reason or another, I can't or don't do it. And at the time, there were no clear answers. The best answers I was coming across was beliefs and you need motivation. And what I tell people is those are all pieces of the puzzle, but I thought there was more to that puzzle. And over the last 15 to 20 years, I that question lingered in my mind. Every time I felt stuck, I wondered why. Why can't I get stuff done? Why do I keep spinning my wheels? Why don't I just do this dang thing so I can get the result that I want?
mhm,
And the more books I read, coaching I did, and seminars I attended, the more I learned about the complexities of the human brain. And what kept coming up over and over, no matter who was teaching it or where I was learning it from, it was, oh, the brain will hold you back because of this.
mm,
Or if you're not aware of this, it can limit progress. And at a certain point, something clicked in my head where I was like, hey, wait a minute. There's a part of our mind built to keep us from growing. There's a
mm,
part of our brain designed to hold us back. And I call this part internal resistance. And it's this brick wall that we hit anytime that we want to do something, but we can't, no matter how much we want to do it. So, for my books, I've shifted into talking about this concept of internal resistance, which I think really resonates with a lot of people because no matter where we are in life, there are things that we want to do or want to be doing, but we're not. And then we feel kind of left with this unanswered question of why.
mm. It sounds to me a little bit like people say all the information now is available on the internet, right?
Yeah.
So you would think that all the information's out there, everyone would be getting ripped and everyone would be like starting a successful business, but it doesn't seem like that's actually the case,
In
right? So
fact, I think it's actually the opposite.
I tend to think that too.
I think we're getting more unhealthy. I think we're getting more fatigued or burnt out and not getting the results that we want.
Mm. So this resistance that you talked about, this
Yeah.
sounds like it was something that was sort of pivotal for you to understand. Is it
Yeah.
Stephen Pressfield who talks about the resistance also? Have you read his books?
I can't say I've read his books, and the concept of resistance does come up here and there,
Mhm.
but and again, I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but it doesn't go really deep into what's causing it. People kind of just talk about, oh yeah, we'll feel resistance. But it really helps to understand that the part of the brain that creates wants and desires, it works separate and independent of the part that actually allows us to act on that desire. This is extremely important. So the
Can
part of
you
the
repeat
brain,
that? Yeah, let's
yeah.
repeat that one more time.
So the part of the brain that creates desires works independent of the part that allows us to act on that desire. So we
Okay.
have one part of our mind that's creating wants, and it's essentially creating endless wants, one after another, at a pace faster than any one person can achieve.
Mhm.
And that's because this part of the brain, its job isn't to check if the want is achievable or achievable for you. It's simply to create wants.
Okay.
And I know many of us listening right now have this experience where they have all these wants and desires and they don't have time for it because, well, this part of the brain isn't checking if you have the time or the energy or the resources. It simply creates wants. It's like an on off switch. But then we have another part of the brain that gives a green light on that want. So this is the part that checks to see if you have the time, energy, resources, if it'll be safe, it'll be fulfilling, and all of that. And if this part doesn't give the green light, we can't act.
Mm.
And one kind of funny thing that I say is for a long time, when I struggle with this, I used to think whoever created humanity, whether it was God, aliens, or evolution, must have been really sick and twisted because how could they do this to us? How could they create this like overwhelming desire for something, but then hold us back from it? But when you look at it from this perspective, it actually makes real good sense, which is why a lot of people who could want something still not be able to take the action to get it.
Makes sense, right? If I see a Ferrari at the traffic light, I go, "Oh, I want that."
Yeah.
Then I pull out my pistol and I go, take the car. Like, okay, well, that wasn't logical, right? Like, or probably, in previous times, you see, a juicy fruit and you're like, "Oh, I want this." But
Yeah.
your brain has to go, "Well, wait a minute. First, we need to check, are we safe? Like, I have to
Yeah.
cross that river. Is that logical? Like, I have to, go try this fruit. It's a new fruit. No one's ever tried it before. It might be dangerous, might be poisonous." Um,
Exactly.
so it makes sense that there are those safeguards in place, but once you start to like kind of learn a little bit more about like behavioral evolution, all of these things are kind of deep rooted in that. And it
Yeah.
seems to me that this safety mechanism probably restricts us more than it is necessary
It
in modern day.
it does. It's a lot of times people will say, "Oh, well, it's the defense mechanism. Or is it trying to protect us?" In many ways, it is, but it can go overboard,
Mm,
and it can actually create the challenge, more challenge than be helpful in it. And so, what I help people understand is that actually both parts can get in the way. The
okay.
parts that create our wants can get in the way, and the parts that create resistance can get in the way. And I'll go into the wants a little bit because I don't really get a lot of opportunity to talk about this, but this is extremely important. And the reason our wants can get in the way is because like I said, the part of the brain that creates wants and desires is unrestrained. So it's creating wants day in and day out at a pace faster than anyone can achieve. You can think of this part of the brain, which I call the wanting mechanism, as a simple on off switch that gets flipped based on certain cues. It sees a new pair of shoes, it wants it. The latest iPhone comes out, it wants that too. Someone attractive walks by, and it wants that as well. The wanting mechanism will create more wants in a single day than we have the time, energy, and resources to achieve, even in our lifetime.
Mm,
Even if we live multiple lives, we couldn't achieve, let alone enjoy, the wants our brain is producing in just a month or in a year.
mm,
And that's because, as I mentioned, the wanting mechanism doesn't understand that our time, energy, and resources are limited. It simply creates wants. And again, it doesn't check to see if our want is achievable or fulfilling. It simply creates wants. And this is where the wants get in our way. Even while we're working on one want, the mechanism will create other wants to chase.
mm,
And so the wanting mechanism is the reason people buy stuff they don't need, chase things that aren't fulfilling, and why many cheat when they're already in a relationship. And like I said, it's also the reason why it's so hard to do the work because this mechanism pulls us in so many directions. It's really difficult to move in any one. And what I've come to realize is that there's actually about a good dozen challenges our wants create. So I've mentioned kind of one part of it, which is the overactive want, but there are other challenges our own wants can create that keeps us from actually achieving the want, which seems counterintuitive, but if a person doesn't understand these things, that's probably why they're stuck and not moving forward in the direction that they want.
mm. So it sounds like the only the not the challenge isn't just that you have too many wants. There's other deeper things happening behind those wants. I mean,
Yeah,
that makes total sense. You're sitting in a meeting, you're trying to concentrate on the topic, and then your brain starts to go to other things. Oh, I want
yeah,
this for lunch, or like I
and
want my coworker to shut up, right?
yeah,
As opposed to the overarching goal of the meeting. Okay, we're trying to figure out what we're going to do with the marketing department.
exactly. And so, if you like, I could discuss a couple other challenges because I think
Yeah.
it'll really resonate. So, one is the overactive want, which I described, and I'll go a little bit more into it so people could really understand it. is that so an overactive want is where the brain just creates all sorts of desires all of the time. It hears about something and it wants it. It sees
Mhm.
something and it wants that too. Oftentimes, it doesn't have to hear or see anything. Just like your example, when you're in the meeting, your brain is going in different directions, saying, "Oh, I'd like coffee. I would like this. I would love to, go out this weekend and things like that." And as I also mentioned, before we can even start on a want, the brain will create other wants to chase.
Mm.
And so a lot of people who have an overactive wanting mechanism, they really can never move forward in anything because their brain's just pulling them in all sorts of directions. As soon as they start on one thing, their brain creates a want for something else. When they move to something else, it creates a want for something different, and they go from one thing to another, barely making progress. So that's the overactive want. Then we have the strong want. The strong want is interesting because it's very counterintuitive to what's being talked about in personal development. So a strong want is a want where somebody wants something really, really bad. It's not about wanting a lot of things, but that one thing really bad.
Mhm.
And as I mentioned, a lot of coaches and experts talk about this, and they call it the burning desire. And they talk about it in the perspective of that it's an important thing. But I would disagree, and that's because when our wants grow, so does our resistance. And a great analogy for this is Einstein's theory of relativity. One of Einstein's theories, the theory of special relativity, says that time and space are not separate. So the three dimensions of space, north, south, up, down, and east, west, as well as time, they're actually one and the same. It's the same fabric. In fact, scientists and physicists refer to it as space time.
Mhm.
And in many ways, our wants and resistance are one and the same. It's the same fabric. So when our wants grow, so does our resistance. And our resistance growing makes our want grow even more. And that in turn makes our resistance grow even further. And very quickly, this becomes this feedback loop where now we want this thing really bad and can't have it really bad. And I know for a fact, you likely, as well as your listeners, have experienced moments where you wanted something really bad and things weren't moving for you. But then as soon as you let it go, things began to fall into place.
Mm.
And it's usually because our want created an equal amount of resistance and it created that stuckness.
Mm.
And another challenge of wants that a lot of people experience is what I call a conflicting want. This is where a person wants two things that are conflicting. And it's really important. So, like I said, the part of the brain that creates wants is unrestrained. So it doesn't check to see if a want it's creating conflicts with another want. It simply creates wants. So a person can have two wants that are conflicting, meaning having one requires giving up the other.
Mm.
Like the nature of the universe, you can't have both. And I'll give a couple examples so you and your listeners can understand what I mean. Some people want to find that special someone, but at the same time date. So by the nature of dating, you can't have that one person because you want to date. By the nature of having one person, you can't be with multiple people. But then there's that desire for both. And then the same thing with a lot of times people want a prestigious job or income, but free time.
Mhm.
Well, for the most part, having a prestigious job means you got to put time into the work. But if you're also wanting free time, there's a conflict there. Like you can't have free time and still have a job. Doesn't make sense. But the brain can still create a want for that. And so in these instances, it really helps to pick one and let go of the other. In
Mhm.
fact, it's really important to pick one and let go of the other because most people who chase both usually end up achieving neither. And if they do achieve both, they can't go deep or they don't find it as fulfilling. So this should help your listeners understand what I mean by the challenges our own wants create. So we have the overactive want, we have the strong want, we have the conflicting want. And again, there's more aspects of the want. If you like, we can talk more about it, but I don't want to keep rambling. So
No, that was excellent. The conflicting want makes a lot of sense to me. I want to be shredded and I want to eat pizza. It's
Yes.
like, okay, well, that's challenging. Now, I
Yeah.
guess on that one, and then I'd like to go back to your middle one, the strong want. What do you think about these kind of individuals who sell out completely for those wants? Um, because I kind of think maybe you don't have to do it like that. Like Kobe Bryant, right? Like that's the famous story, the Mamba mentality, right? But
And can you tell me what you mean by the mama mentality, like
all
his
right,
work
so
ethic?
yeah, so like his work ethic, but also just kind of like what I have to do is more important than my teammates. I'm kind of an asshole. I'm difficult like with my teammates. I accept, no slack from them. I got the killer instinct. I need that. I want that. I shun all other things in my life. Which famously after Kobe died, he became a pretty good entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Kind of applying maybe that same mentality, but like is it necessary to take it to that level to be successful? Because you can look at someone like LeBron or Steph Curry, and they don't seem to have done it in that way. It's
Yeah.
like the story about the three great tennis players, Rafa, Djokovic, and Federer. Right, Federer's on the court before the game, or on the court before match, and he's laughing, he's joking, he's hitting trick shots, he's flirting with the ball girls, and then Federer gets on the court and he's all intense. He's like,
Yeah.
"Rah, rah," and then Djokovic gets on the court and he's like robotic, just like hit the shots, hit the
Yeah.
shots, hit the shots. So, right, there's different ways of doing it.
Yeah.
Um,
I
so I
loved it.
guess, I just kind of wonder, do we have to sell out for our goals? Because the title of my podcast is Entrepreneur Among Other Things, right?
Yeah.
Like I have other interests in life. I don't identify with being an entrepreneur exclusively and solely. So,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on something like that?
This is a fantastic question, and a question I haven't received yet, and a question that is going to be extremely important to understand. And in a way, we could even bring in the two famous soccer players,
Yep.
Messi
Messi and
and
Ronaldo.
Ronaldo. Very different approach to their game, but both highly successful. And I want to start by saying there's a million ways to make $1 million. There isn't just one way.
Mhm.
There's actually a lot of ways. And it could feel like when we see somebody successful or at the echelon of success, thinking that's what we need to do to get
Mhm.
success because that's what he's doing and he has it. But there isn't just one approach. And to go even deeper is you want to use approach that works within your resistance.
Mm.
Meaning we're going to have a lot of things that hold us back. There's a lot of challenges our own mind and body create. And it's going to be important to work around those challenges. So, a level of resistance one person might have, another person might not. So, for example, I have historically had an overactive wanting mechanism. My mind got stimulated by all the different things to do, which is why I've traveled to over 100 countries, written over a dozen books, and done all sorts of activities like skydiving, scuba diving, rock climbing, all that stuff, because my brain was stimulated by all the different things to do, like I said. And although this created a lot of great experiences, I couldn't move forward in a single direction. And I realized if I wanted to accomplish anything in life, I had to get a handle on my wanting mechanism. And so for me, what was really important is to cut out as many triggers and stimuli as possible. So for me, I went as far as that meant cutting out television, social media, YouTube, internet. I even cut out personal development. I know you asked me if I had read this person's book. It might be shocking, but I don't read too much people's content because it actually stimulates me,
Mm.
overly stimulates me to the point where I've even cut out a lot of people in my life and contained and created a bubble that contains as much distracting stimuli as possible.
Hmm.
Now, this is something that I need to do because of the challenge of my wanting mechanism. This may not work for a lot of other people because they're not overly stimulated and they're not easily distracted by distractions in their environment or by other people. But because I am, this is the extent that I had to go. And so when we look at examples like Kobe Bryant and the tennis players and even the soccer players, it's what they needed to get the success they want. When you look at a guy like Messi, I think he has a very little inner activity that is distracting. I don't think he has a lot of thoughts in his head of this isn't going to work. I can't do this. I have to be better. I have to prove myself and blah, blah, blah. He has none of that.
Mm,
So he doesn't have to work on pushing through those things and he can kind of show up the way he does. When you got Ronaldo, you I'm not saying I know what's going on in his head, but just from his lifestyle, you could say that he needs to impress. He needs to
mhm,
feel superior. He needs to be the best. And then so he does the things that's going to make him feel that way. And so again, there's a million ways to make $1 million. So we don't have to do what one successful person is doing to get that success. There's actually different approaches and not just normal success, even echelons of success. And it all really comes down to what is going on for us internally and what we need to do to manage it to be able to move forward.
mm,
Another good example could be some people tend to be a lot more insecure inside. They have a lot of feelings of undeserving, I'm not enough. And that feeling creates this push. It's like this internal push that they can't even control that makes them need to prove themselves, make them feel like they are enough. So they have to do a lot of stuff just so that internal part can feel like they're enough to show up in a way where another person doesn't have to do any of those things. I hope
mm.
that kind of gives a better or clearer picture.
Yeah, so kind of what I took from that is that someone like Kobe Bryant, his dual wants may not have been what we would expect within ourselves, right? Like
Yes.
his dual wants, if it was Alex, would be like, I want to spend time with my friends and family and relax, and I want to be really good at basketball. But for him, he may not have had that want for like friends, family,
Yeah.
relaxation time. His
Yeah.
want might have been, just exclusively solely basketball. Like, I want to be the best and I want to win. And it's like,
Yeah.
how do these dual wants play together? So
Yeah.
that does make sense that it's more natural to him. He kind of built a career that was natural to him. Whereas
Yeah.
someone like Steph Curry, it may not have ever been like a decision mechanism for him to be like, do I want to be great at basketball or be like a great family person? That was maybe an easier decision for him.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And if we were to kind of psychoanalyze Kobe Bryant, again, I don't know him, I haven't met him, but there's a certain point where I watched enough basketball to kind of pick up on his personality. He was really trying to emulate Michael Jordan,
Mm,
right? Michael Jordan kind of set this bar, not just in basketball, but in sports in general.
yeah. Yep.
And when you see that like crazy drive to win, he was really one of the first to kind of show that. And when you look at Kobe Bryant's even moves and styles, like he was really trying to emulate Michael Jordan. And because Michael Jordan was known for a lot of those characteristics, I feel like Kobe Bryant thought this is what I needed to do to be successful. He saw the model and he's like, okay, this is greatness. This is what this person did to achieve greatness. So I'm going to start doing that. And again, I suspect he had, even though he had a lot of success, he was wealthy and all of that, I'm sure he had a lot of insecurities that were driving that too, that need to be the best and things of that
Hmm.
nature. Later on in his career, um, a lot of it did kind of subside where he was less competitive and more, I think, present and happy in where he was
Hmm.
in life. But in his competitive stage, I think it was driven by a lot of what was going on internally.
Talk about the middle one, the strong want. When you were initially describing that, I was a little bit confused, and then eventually it kind of clicked with me. So I played soccer in college, played in high school, and I played in college. Um, And I had an extremely strong want to be good at that sport
Yeah.
when I was 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 20, 21, to the point that I think it was detrimental to my game. Like,
Yes.
I just couldn't relax.
Yes.
Like, even sometimes teammates would, I'd miss a shot and I would just be so frustrated and upset with myself. The teammates would be like, dude, relax,
Yeah.
like chill kind of thing. I see that now, I'm 10, 15 years past that. But can you talk about that strong want, how it
Yeah.
almost overpowers our ability to make progress and relax and just do the thing?
Yeah, exactly. So that is a great example of how a strong want keeps us from achieving the thing that we want. And I'll kind of start with your example because you had this really strong desire. It was all focused on it. And because it was all focused on it, there was a lot of pressure to perform.
Mhm.
And so your mind was really focused on performing. And when our mind gets really focused, it can't have it can't expand and think of other possibilities or opportunities and all of these things going on. It's just like it needs this one thing.
Mhm.
And because we close ourselves off to creativity and other options and things of that nature, we don't see a lot of solutions that are just kind of staring at us in the face. So that's one example of it. But then because that want is so strong, it just like consumes our awareness. We
Mhm.
really can't think about anything else. We can't think about the people we're around. We can't understand or have compassion for them and understand how we're coming off that is actually detrimental to ourselves. So this is how our strong want can show up in relationships. So I guess when I say relationships, I mean the people that are going to help us achieve that want. So let's
Mhm.
look at an entrepreneur setting. When we're maybe a manager and we have this strong desire that we don't even think about how other people are feeling or how it the experience is for them, that creates a disconnect in them, and it's harder for them to kind of help us get there. So that's how a strong want shows up in the relationship side. But in the personal side, it consumes our awareness so much we can't even almost think about what it is that we need to do to achieve the want. Does that make
Mm.
sense?
Mhm.
Yeah. And so a lot of times what I tell people when they have a strong want is to let go of the want. And a lot of people have different ways of how they kind of reduce the want. I'm going to correct myself. With a strong want, you're not trying to let go of it, but you're trying to reduce the intensity of it.
'Kay.
And the way some people do it is that they'll distract themselves, or a lot of times people will use logic. And those are good short term solutions, but I don't think they'll work for the long term because the want is still in us and we're trying to manage it. It's better to really release it, reduce the intensity of it. And the way I help clients or how I teach people to do it is to sit in the feeling of the want, sit in the pain of wanting it, not having it, and wanting to do anything to get it. Because when we can sit in the pain, we can reduce the pain. And when we reduce the pain, it reduces the want because a lot of our intensity from the want is coming from that pain. And when we reduce the want, we can reduce the resistance. And as I mentioned, when we reduce the resistance, it becomes easier to do that thing. Now, what's really fascinating about strong wants is that remember I talked about this runaway process where when we want something, our resistance grows, and then the resistance growing makes our want grow even more.
Yes.
Well, it could be triggered internally. And what I mean by that is if a person has limiting beliefs, they don't feel deserving, they feel like they're not enough, or they don't feel good enough to have this thing, that will trigger that runaway process. So we want this thing, and the want gets filtered by resistance. And resistance says, no, you don't have good beliefs, you don't feel deserving the success, you're not enough, you couldn't achieve it. Well, that resistance makes a want grow, and the want growing makes a resistance try harder to hold you back,
Mm.
and then it grows even more. And again, it becomes this runaway process or feedback loop where
Mhm.
now we want this thing really bad and can't have it really bad. So it can be triggered within ourselves, and it can just be automatic. It's like we have a want, and all of a sudden it just goes through this loop in seconds, and now we're just like in this intensity of wanting it and not being able to get it.
Mm. Interesting. Yeah, the desire for the want kind of reinforces the idea that you need that thing and you aren't worthy of that because you don't have it yet.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't mean. Though unworthy, it doesn't have to come from you don't have it. It can actually just come from our upbringing. If we grew up in with harsh parents, um, you know, peers and bullies making fun of us, teachers saying our work wasn't good. Over time, the brain starts to think, I'm not smart, I'm not capable, I'm not good, or I'm not good enough. And it's this core belief at the very pit of our being that all of our wants filter through. So that's what I mean when I say undeserving, things like that nature.
Where do you think some of these wants come from? Right, like I'm probably a lot like you. I have a lot of varied interests, and I've always been driven. I love business. I've loved sports. I asked my parents, like, why do you think that was? Like, my brother was just not nearly as driven as I was with sports. Like, I'd spend like 3 hours playing soccer every day after school, like
Yeah.
in the snow, like wearing like Carhartt jackets playing soccer. Like, that was just not true for my brother or my mom and dad, I think, to be honest with you. It's like, where do you think that something like that comes from? Because I still don't know where that came from in
Okay.
me.
Well, it's a pretty obvious answer, but before I answer, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Did your brother watch a lot of sports? And did you watch a lot of sports?
When we were kids, we watched some. I wouldn't say we were like a super big sports family.
Yeah.
We're from Columbus, Ohio, so like we're Ohio State Buckeye people, like through and
Yeah.
through. There's no getting around that. But no, I don't think that we had like my parents didn't hardly even play sports.
Yeah. No. I'm talking about watch. I'm talking about watching sports on television, like
Yeah,
the watching Buckeyes, watching.
I wouldn't say we were like obsessive about sports as a family.
Yeah. Okay. The other question I have is, did your brother watch a lot of television, and did you watch a lot of television growing up?
I wouldn't say we watched a lot of television. We watched some, definitely. You know, I think we were a
Well,
pretty normal American family in the '90s kind of
all
thing.
right. Well, I'm gonna say a pretty normal American family watches a lot of television.
Yeah.
So, so that's your answer right there. A lot of our wants come from television
Mm,
because we see a lot of commercials. Our commercials use a lot of psychology to
hmm
implant wants into our brain.
hmm
After watching enough commercials, we start to tune it out on like consciously. But if you actually pay attention to commercials, the amount of money that gets spent to try to convince people to want to have what they're presenting and the amount of motivation and inspiration. Like you watch a Nike commercial and it just wants you to want to go out and accomplish something,
Right.
like something big. And then you watch another commercial that's similar, like a Lexus commercial. It's like, oh wow, I want that luxury car.
Right.
And then
Right.
you watch the Home Depot commercial, and then it's like, oh, I want to go out and do stuff.
I want to build a deck right
Yeah,
now.
yeah. And the way they talk, the narrator has that crisp voice where it's just like, oh yeah, just like we hear it and it's like, yeah, I want to do this. And again, watch enough of those commercials day in and day out, week after week, month after month, it is creating all these wants and desires in us, which is why when I was trying to contain my wanting mechanism, what was the first things I told you I cut out? I cut out television, social media, YouTube, internet,
hmm
because that's where a lot of my wants were being stimulated. So
hmm
that's one reason, one place where our wants come from
mm
media. And then another is from people. So just seeing someone having something can trigger us to have it. So if you remember the example I use, you see someone with nice shoes, the latest iPhone comes out, someone attractive walks by, the brain just triggers a want. So a lot of our wants are essentially just triggers based on our environment. We see something, we hear about something, we think about something, and then it triggers and stimulates a want for it. Now, when we compare your brother to you, obviously he wasn't triggered as much, but this is where what I talked about, like some people just have an overactive wanting mechanism.
Yeah, they're
They're,
called entrepreneurs. I know a lot of them.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
hmm
So when, so their trigger, their wants, their brain triggers more wants for things, and when it does trigger a want, it's much stronger.
Mm,
Does that make sense? So this is where we go into the strong want.
yeah.
Yeah. So I hope that helps.
No, it does, and at the end of the day, probably never be able to deduce why me and my brother are different or why I chose the path that I chose, but I can't ever remember some specific thing as a kid, like you said, like a Nike commercial, and it's like, oh man, I want to be a pro soccer player. But I'm sure it's not that simple. It's a building process of time
Yeah.
over time, thing over thing.
I'm kind of interested why it hasn't connected because to me, when I explain what I did, it's like, oh yeah, it makes so much sense. Yeah, television, seeing others having things. If I have an overactive want or a strong want, I'm going to be much more stimulated by it. I'm just curious where that disconnect is.
That you don't think that I put it together, that television or social media or whatever it is.
Yeah,
I don't know. I guess just because there's plenty of people who I know who watched TV as a kid and weren't willing to go out in the snow and play soccer when they were 15, 16, 17.
yeah,
And they aren't willing to go out and be an entrepreneur either, right? Like many people I know, I went to school and studied entrepreneurship. So clearly those kids had already made a decision that they are interested in entrepreneurial endeavors. But I would say, 4 out of 5, 3 out of 5 of those kids never went on and did start a business. So it's like, what do I make out of that? That
they probably had resistance. So
they
yeah,
definitely had something that was blocking them. And
yeah,
and I always say, it gets harder year over year to make that leap because when you're 19 or 20 or 21, this is really why I started my business. I was in an entrepreneurship 101 class and I heard the professor give this kind of lecture about all the reasons to start a business while you're in college. And it's sort of counterintuitive, right? Like you don't have any money, you don't have any resources, you've never done something like this before, but those were all the reasons why you should start a business because you don't have any money to lose. You've never done this before, so you have an enormous amount of time to still kind of like get back on your feet if it doesn't work. And you don't have resources, but actually at a college, you have a lot of resources around you. You have marketing professionals, lawyers, accountants, so on and so forth. So that just made so much sense to me logically. So I started a business probably 12 months later.
yeah.
So by the time that I was 21, I had already started a business and ran, multiple events, and I had a bank account and I had an EIN and I was paying taxes. So it was just so much simpler for me when I was 22 and I moved back home. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to obviously start another business. Like that's just who I
Yeah.
am and what I do. Whereas I think a lot of young people, they went out and they got a job at, a big company that was tied to the university, like Smuckers, after school. And then they moved from 50 grand to 70 grand and 70 grand to 80 grand. And then they got a girlfriend or a boyfriend and then they got married and they
And
had a
then got
kid. And
high.
it's like, yeah. So it's like now, like we've got, 2 kids and a mortgage and a house and we're both making, 70, 80, 90 grand. Like we can't leave this and start like a business. That's
Business, yeah,
crazy, man. Like,
yeah, yeah, exactly. So I wish I had somebody tell me that when I was at that age because I did have a lot of time and I did have a lot of inspiration, but I didn't know how to direct it. And
mhm,
so I directed it towards unhealthy things because those were the people that I was around. I unfortunately was around not some of the most motivated people, and that did influence me.
mm,
And another way I have changed to get to this point is I am very conscious about the people I allow into my life. Like if people aren't growing or helping me grow, then they're just not allowed. Like there's no way around it. It's
mm,
because I know how influenced I am by my surroundings,
mm,
even my environment. In my environment, I keep the things that's going to help me stay focused, and I remove the things that I have to fight, um, to resist or to push distractions away. And that's just the way that I am. And so, like getting back to you, I think what was pivotal is hearing this thing. I don't think if you heard it, you would have actually started a business and seen what it was like to want to continue doing it. And you probably could have ended up the way a lot of your friends did. And the reason our friends go down that route is because that is the conditioning.
mhm,
That is the conditioning, not just in from people who are growing up. It's like, oh, you got to work hard in school so you can get into good college. And when you get into good college, you can get a good job. So employers can like you. And when you can get a good job, you can make money and have a house. And that's really the conditioning. And it's
Yeah.
also in a lot of the TV shows that we're watching, a lot of the sitcoms. It's literally that's what they are presenting.
Mhm.
Uh, the the family with the house, the husband works, the wife stays home, things of that nature. So we're picking up all of these things in our environment. And yes, some people tend to initially have more drive or a stronger want for things, whereas some people don't. So those people who don't can watch television and see this inspiring stuff and not be motivated. I'm going to try to explain it one more way is you've seen the different quadrants that explain behaviors in different ways. There's the what is it? Anyways, so I have my own quadrant,
Okay.
and there's the a person can have a high want and low resistance.
Okay.
One quadrant, a person can have a high want and high resistance. A person can have a low want and low resistance, and a person can have a low want and high resistance. So when you see the people with the echelon of success, high want, low resistance. So
Right.
they have a lot of drive and they don't have a lot of stuff holding them back. So
Mhm.
when they think about doing something, they can just do it. When you see the people, then there's people with high want and high resistance. There are people who want that level of success, but they have so much resistance that gets in the way. It creates a lot of challenges. In
Mhm.
fact, I would even go as far as to say, when you look at the people who have a lot of these disorders, eating disorders and addictions and things of that nature, I think it's a manifestation that they have the strong want, but the resistance is so strong that um, to keep them from going after that want, it creates all these unhealthy patterns and destructive behaviors to keep them from achieving that want.
Mm.
Then you have the low want and low resistance. This is a person who doesn't have a lot of strong burning desires to go out and do things. And they don't have a lot of resistance either. So when they do want to do something, it's pretty easy. These guys are the ones who are truly happy in life. They're just chill
Mm.
and
Yeah.
and women love them
Mm.
because when women are around them, they don't have this high want that creates this uncomfortableness feeling for them. And because they have low resistance, if a woman does want to progress with a guy, he doesn't have to go through all this inner turmoil. So like things are just always easy.
I,
The
I was
challenge,
gonna I was gonna talk about that earlier. Sorry to interrupt you there, but
yeah,
like this is something that I have heard in the dating space.
yeah,
Like the guys who have sort of like a I don't really like need this, or I don't
yeah,
really like this girl's pretty, but like doesn't matter to me, like if she's interested in me or not. Like
yeah,
that is a strategy that seems to really win because as you're talking about, if you have that very high want, like, oh, this girl is so pretty, like I have to go
yeah.
talk to her, I have to say something to her. It's almost like off-putting at some
It,
capacity.
yeah, because she could feel it, and it's
Yes.
like, and it's uncomfortable for her. Like it doesn't
Right.
feel good.
It
But when
feels
she,
like the stakes are extremely high, right?
yeah,
This is the $1,000,000 question on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. I have to
yeah,
get this right or else I'm a loser. But if
yeah.
it's like, it's the first question, it's like, it doesn't even matter. I don't have anything to lose right now.
Yeah, so when she's around a guy who doesn't have a high want, she can feel comfortable, like she's at ease. It's like her defenses aren't going up.
Mm.
And what's really cool about the guys who have the low resistance is if she does want things to move forward, the guys with the low resistance can do it in a much more fluid way where it just feels nice to be around a guy like that. But if a guy has low resistance, low want and a high, if it has high resistance, when a girl approaches a guy like that, it's like, okay, sure, she likes the guy and wants to move forward, but he's got all this inner turmoil that makes the whole interaction awkward and weird.
Mm.
And so that's why the women love the low resistance and low want guys.
Mm.
The challenge they have with such guys is because they have such a low want, um, they're hard to keep around. Does that
Mhm.
make sense?
Yep.
And then you have the quadrant, which is low want and high resistance. this is your couch potatoes. They don't
Mm,
have a lot of desire. And if a desire does come up, they have such high resistance, they really can't do much. They really physically aren't able to do a lot. And so they do the minimum and things like, watching television, they experience life passively.
mm,
And when you look at a lot of the people, like kind of the homeless on the streets and things of that nature, I think they ended up that way because they have such high resistance and
mm.
not enough want to push things through. And
That
even
makes
if we
sense.
even if we try to help them, it's hard because essentially we're going to have to end up babysitting and taking care of them because they can't do it for themselves. There's not enough want and just too high of a resistance to even do anything. So when we look at this quadrant, I'm seeing you as someone who has a high want. And I wouldn't say you have low resistance, but you have much lower resistance than a lot of people because you've got this podcast, you've been an entrepreneur, and you're doing actually quite successful with your business. Not only that, but the fact that you had this professor give you that insight of, hey, this is the best time to be an entrepreneur. You actually went out and did it. I'm sure a lot of people heard that from him and they didn't do it. And it's likely because they had high resistance, even though they had
Mm,
the high one.
mm.
So hopefully that kind of helps explain maybe where you're coming from. It's just you naturally have a high want and a lower resistance than most.
Yes, I definitely I would agree with that assessment that there is some resistance there, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't and you when you hear these stories about some of history's greatest entrepreneurs, it's pretty obvious that they had an extremely high want and almost no resistance at all.
Yeah.
So,
100%.
if you hear the
Elon
story of
Musk.
yeah, yeah, Elon Musk, a great example is Michael Dell or Sam Walton. In Michael Dell's autobiography, he had like an individual he brought in as like a CFO or an accountant or something like that, and they were taking on IBM, which IBM was the world's largest company at that
Yeah.
point in time. I think it was the first $100 billion company at that time, and they were working like 14-hour days, and he did it for like 4 years, and then he like went to Michael Dell and he's like, dude, like I'm losing my hair, like I'm sick, I'm stressed, like I can't do this. But Dell was just like water off of a duck's back. He was just like, "What? Like this is so fun. Like this is awesome. Like we're taking on IBM." And it was just so easy for him. And kind of the phrase that they say is he built a company that was natural to him. Like working like that was just natural.
Natural.
It wasn't a challenge. There was no resistance there for him.
Yeah.
He liked doing it, and it wasn't really like work for him. Of
Yeah.
course, he still had to get up and go do it, but it was just easy.
Yeah. And so two people can do the same thing, and one person can lose their hair, go gray, stressed out, all of that, because of one simple thing. They just have more resistance they have to push through.
Mm,
Because they're pushing through more resistance, it creates more stress. Like pushing through resistance actually creates a lot of stress. And the more we are facing resistance, the more stress there is. And if a person, um, a lot of the things that some people choose to do, like maybe they pick the profession and they wake up not wanting to go there. It's because it's resistance. And because they don't
mhm,
want to do it, it's painful, it's stressful, and they don't enjoy it. And another person who doesn't have resistance can do the same exact thing and even operate on a higher level. And they don't have to experience those things. In fact, when you were talking about Michael Dell, my mentor right now came to my mind. His name is Bill Walsh. This guy is a machine. Like he sleeps 3 hours a day. He
jeez.
travels around the world. He's been on over maybe 5,000 stages, which is incredible. Like 5,000 stages sounds like 5,000, but when you really break it down, like how many stages you have to be on each month and each week to get to 5,000, it's pretty wild.
Yeah.
And majority of his stages is it's his own stage. He creates like 200 stages and platforms for people to speak on all over the
Mm,
country and the world. And he's just like a machine. And one of the reasons I like being around him is because I want to have that seep into me. So prior to meeting him, it was hard. I would say I don't like to use words that might reinforce something that might not be helpful later, but I'll say historically, I was a workaholic. I enjoyed writing. That's why I've written 12 books. I've traveled to 100 countries. I've done a lot of pretty cool stuff, and it doesn't happen by sitting around and watching television. But he was on another level. I couldn't operate that way. And just being around him, I it it just seeped into me his ability to wake up early and go to bed late and operate on that level,
Mm,
like on a day-to-day basis, which I didn't think was possible. I had heard
mm,
a lot of studies saying you have to get 8 hours of sleep, and I would be getting a little bit more, and I thought that was just the way it is. But when I met guys like him, it really blew my mind of what is possible for the human
mhm.
body. But I still don't operate like him because
Yeah.
I still have resistance that I'm working through. And it's just amazing because he can do what he's doing and be doing it for this long and not be burnt out where almost everybody who were doing it at his level would burn out. In fact, I would go as far as to say Michael Dell would be burnt out at what this guy's doing.
Hmm.
Because
Well,
working
maybe
14,
maybe if it was that topic, right? But,
yeah,
maybe if it was computers, like, he loved it, and it was
yeah.
business and entrepreneurial efforts and supply chain, he just loved that stuff.
Well, what I'm saying is Michael Dell was sitting in front of his computer for 14 hours a day. When you're spending your time traveling, creating stages, and all of that, that's different. So I don't think
Yeah,
Michael Dell could have done it. And
yeah,
I've never met anyone like him. Like I said,
yeah,
I traveled to 100 countries. I met all kinds of people. Never met anyone like Bill Walsh. So
yeah. Well, it's clear that that individual did something that was natural to him, which is
yeah,
tough, like, so, David Senra, he hosts the Founders Podcast, and he talks about, like, entrepreneurial archetypes, and one of the things he says is you have to make sure that you're not chasing an archetype that is not similar to what you are. So, like,
yeah.
there's 2 or 3 entrepreneurs who've become really famous, right? Like, we've got Elon Musk, we've got Jeff
Jeff Bezos,
Bezos,
Mark
right?
Zuckerberg.
Mark Zuckerberg. Yep. So then, most people could maybe name like 3 or 4. Bill Gates. Well, who else is famous? Like maybe my mom would get Warren Buffett.
Yeah.
Um, then after that, it kind of starts Richard Branson, right? Okay, so we've got like 4 or 5 people, right? And the
And,
way Elon works, go ahead.
and they're all very different in how they
Exactly.
very different. I mean, I'm
Exactly.
glad you brought up Richard Branson because he's kind of a,
He seems like a fun guy. He seems like the guy you wanna hang out with. Like, if you're gonna
yeah.
go get dinner with one of these guys and you're like, "I'm just doing it for fun. I wanna have a fun night," it seems like Richard Branson would be the guy.
So it's interesting. I met another person who has hung out with Richard Branson, and that's exactly what he said. He's
Yeah.
like, Richard Branson's just all about fun. And I'm not. I actually, a lot of the things, I remember I was at a bar once and there was a woman, she called me grumpy
Mm,
because I'm not somebody who enjoys fun the way other people do it.
mhm. Well,
You
you're
know?
not seeking fun at all expense of other things,
Yeah,
right? You talk
yeah.
about your dual wants, it's like, "Hey, I wanna, like, focus on my success more," right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Mhm.
And honestly, I don't enjoy fun. A lot of the things that people find fun, that even
Doesn't
Richard Branson.
enjoy fun. I don't know, like, I've ever heard anyone say that.
I know. I mean, yeah. So it may not make sense, but if you got to know me a little bit more, you know what I'm saying. So what Richard Branson does, for me, it doesn't entice me or pull me or make me want to meet him. For
Mm,
I guess for someone like you, yeah, like if you are into that, I would probably be more drawn to guys like Elon Musk, who are literally bending physical law to their will, and yeah. So, but anyways, you're gonna say something about that.
well, the thing that, David Senra is trying to get at is ensuring that young people know, "Hey, Elon Musk isn't the only entrepreneurial archetype out there. Like Warren Buffett and Elon Musk work about as diametrically different as you possibly can. Like
Yeah,
Warren Buffett, the joke is that he'll tell people, "I'm the wealthiest person on earth," and they go, "Well, I think you were at one point, but now you're maybe the third or fourth or fifth." And he goes, "No, I'll prove it to you." He opens his calendar book. He goes, "Monday, I have nothing. Tuesday, I have nothing. Wednesday, I have a lunch meeting. Thursday, I have nothing." So he's saying like, "Well, I don't, I'm not working." Like, um, And like you said, that might be like painful for someone like Elon Musk. Elon Musk's
Yeah.
like, "We have to get to Mars, dude." Like, "What do you
Yeah, I
mean you don't have
know.
meetings, you know? What
Yeah.
do you mean you're not in the factory?" Um,
Yeah.
so there are different entrepreneurial archetypes that you can utilize, just like we talked about, like Kobe and LeBron. They're both great. Messi and Ronaldo, they're both great, but they have different archetypes as to how they got there.
Yeah.
And he just doesn't want young people to see Elon and go, I have to sleep in the factory every night and I've got to like be on the assembly line and I have to like focused on the biggest problem for the next week and then move on. Like that's not the only way to do it. And let's not get twisted in the idea that it is the only way to do it.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that because there was a point when I cut everything out. I still have cut out all forms of media out, but I followed Elon for about a good 2 years. So I followed a couple of websites that kind of talked about Tesla and SpaceX. And so the only thing I really knew was Elon. And that did get ingrained in me
Hmm.
that I needed to really rough it and go, no holds bar type of thing. And it does take its toll.
Hmm.
And he can do it, but I'm
Right.
glad that you brought that up because it doesn't mean other people have to do it that way or that that's what you need to do to have that level of success. And we do lose sight of it because as I had mentioned earlier, when we only see one model, it's easy to feel like that's the only way. And as I'm talking, or I kind of realized this the last few months, this Bill Walsh person, I probably wanted him to be my mentor so I could be more like Elon. So I could seep in this quality of just brute force all day long because that's what I thought I may have needed to have the success that I want. And it's kind of good to hear that again, there's a million ways to make $1 million.
Yeah. Another one that I really love that's kind of closer to the exact, diametric opposition to this is Ed Thorpe. So Ed Thorpe, he's the man that beat blackjack. So there's a book, amazing book written about him called A Man for All Markets. So he was the first person to discover card counting. So he was a mathematician. He eventually made it to MIT, but I don't know where he was at the time. And people were saying it's impossible to, you know, beat blackjack. And he said, well, that's not true because, there's a statistical likelihood after certain cards have came out that the other cards are going to come out. So he basically, learned how to count cards. And this was at a time when I don't even know if they were using more than one deck or they were using three decks, which so it was much easier even then. So he wrote this paper and he said, all right, I'm going to prove it. And he went out and he did. He beat the casinos like time and time again. So he, got some acclaim for that and he wrote a book, how to beat blackjack and all this stuff. And then he eventually got into the stock market and he was like, well, this is basically just very similar. So he was actually one of the first people to develop a formula for options pricing.
Oh,
So
the
he
Black Scholes, is that him?
yeah, so he was like kind of the math that like began that. He doesn't get credits for Black Skulls, but he was seriously involved in it. So he had his own options pricing thing. So he would just like price options and he'd be like, "Oh, this is like a great mismatch in the value of this." So he would buy this and he started a hedge fund and he ran it for maybe like 10 or 12 years. And he said, after a decade or so, I realized like I had more money than I would ever be able to spend in like two or three lifetimes. So he's like, so I just shut the hedge fund down. And he's like, I just closed it down. I returned everybody their capital plus their, gains. And I just essentially retired. And someone asked him, like, well, what'd you do? And he has this quote that I love. He's like, I exercised. I spent time with my friends and family. I read great books. I did the activities that I wanted to do. I learned new skills and I just generally enjoyed life. And it's like, I love that because if you think, oh, if you have infinite money, like sure, maybe you'd want to like go out and build a business. I definitely have that in me, but like, how sweet would life be if you're just like, I wake up, I exercise, I call my friend, I go hang out with them, I sit down, I read, I want to learn how to surf. I have like the best surf coach, that money can buy. I learn how to surf in the afternoon. I like come home to my family, so he just did it in a much different way, and it's a different
Yeah.
entrepreneurial archetype.
And I'm glad you brought that up too, because people aren't seeing that. The story that we're getting is that
Yeah.
where we're going to want to work forever. And people do get complacent because a lot of the story that I'm hearing is people who retire end up going back to work because they get bored. And he didn't do that. He retired and just found things that he really enjoyed that he stuck with. Though I guess my question would be, do you think if you had enough money for several lifetimes, that's a route you would go in?
Probably not. I think that
Mm,
I would invest in companies.
okay.
I don't know if I would, if I had enough money that, like, you'd have to really try to lose this money. I think I would probably still be involved in business,
Yeah.
but I would probably be involved in, like, Cam, I'm going to fund your business and I'm going to give you as much support as I possibly can, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to be your CFO, dude. Like, I'm not, I'm not coming into the office and doing your bookkeeping,
Yeah.
from 9 to 5.
Yeah. Have you heard of SCORE?
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, this
Tell me
might be
more.
a good. So there's an organization um, where a lot of these retired CEOs, C-suite executives, because they're bored, they just help people in their business,
Hmm.
and it's
That's
free.
a great idea.
Yeah, and nobody knows about it, but you can literally get a lot of high quality coaching and advice from people who have done high quality stuff. And the fact that the reason they're even doing it is because they were successful at it and retired and they just need something to do now.
It's
So,
called SCORE.
yeah, SCORE, SCORE.
SCORE, free small business mentorship and resources. Get the
Yeah.
free expert mentoring to grow your small business. Whether you're starting, expanding, or preparing to exit, SCORE's experienced mentors are here to guide you at no cost.
It's
Yeah,
free.
this is
And these
cool.
are these are all people who achieved the success that we're seeking. And because they've retired, they just want to give back or spend their time doing stuff.
I'm gonna leave this open. I got a problem that I'm working on. Maybe
Yeah.
I'll find somebody on that avenue.
Yeah. When I was looking to protect an IP, and I could have hired a really expensive lawyer. You just go to SCORE and find someone who has done IP, and you can, get some pretty good advice.
Mm. So, Cam, you said 12 books.
$12 now, yeah.
So that's and over a lot of different topics. I understand.
Um, for the most part, in the area of mental performance, mental, physical, and emotional performance. Yeah.
What was the most recent book?
My most recent book is called Let Food Be Thy Medicine. So this is where the physical aspect is coming from.
Okay.
Um, we're in a crisis right now in terms of our health. I mean, it is insanely bad. People don't even realize how bad it is. And we don't realize how bad it is because I'm going to use an analogy that fish, they don't know that they're wet. They spend their
Mhm.
whole life in water, so they can't see that they're in a medium that's different from other mediums, like being in air or in a vacuum. And so when we live in a culture or country where what we see is, unhealthiness and whatever, we just think that's the norm. We don't know
Mm.
that there's something outside of it, and that this is likely my lot in life, and it's going to be really hard to get out of it. But
Mhm.
having traveled to 100 countries, I have seen with my own eyes that that's not the case.
Mhm.
And the amount of food and consumption that we have, it's really deteriorating people's mental, physical, and emotional performance. And we're seeing that with kids getting on medication at an earlier and earlier ages. And I'm talking about like anxiety,
Mm.
ADD, things like that. That doesn't even talk about the physical stuff like the diabetes, hypertension, and all of that. And it isn't normal, but it's becoming normalized because that's what we're seeing. And unfortunately, there is consciousness. People do want to eat better and make better choices, but the food companies have become ever more deceptive in their marketing to
Mhm.
make their food seem like it's healthy when it's actually just as bad. So the labels are making people think that they're eating organic or they're not taking in artificial flavors and ingredients or unhealthy chemicals when they still are. In fact, it's probably even worse. Yet they're thinking they're eating healthy. So I wrote a book that goes really deep into this topic of how to think about and approach what you put inside your body, from the water to the salt to the pasta to the rice. Each chapter talks about one specific type of food item and what to think about. And then I also have links to my best option, because it's one thing to know this is what you need to be aware of, but then another thing to actually find an option that fits that criteria. And it's really hard. So I've done all the work for people. And in fact, I don't even charge for the book. It's
Mm.
free. People can just go to mindlily.com/health, and it'll open up the PDF and I'll go into detail chapter by chapter. And right now it's only at 75 pages, but I think when I'm done, it'll get to about 150, because not only am I going to talk about food, or what we put in our body, but what we put on our body. A lot of times people are using sunscreens and lotions and soap. All of that has chemicals and toxic chemicals. In fact, several years ago, Procter and Gamble, this whole big thing came out where they were knowingly putting in chemicals that were cancerous in a lot of their products.
Mhm.
And I don't know how that unfolded, but a lot of the stuff that we're using, thinking that it again is healthy, it's actually very detrimental. So it's gonna go into specifics of even what floss to use. You know what's really crazy is I have not found a single floss that doesn't either have wax or flavor.
Mm.
And wax and flavor is both chemicals. I only found one, and it took me a long time to find that. So I'm gonna include that as well. So
We sell a silk floss, but it's like crazy expensive,
yeah,
right? Because you take the plastic floss and you just mash it right into your bloodstream. Your gums start
like,
bleeding, and you're just like literally just like cranking that plastic.
yeah,
I'm all over the plastic thing. I'm all over the what you're putting on your body.
yeah.
Because
I'll even go as far as to say, not to go against your product, but I suspect it's flavored silk.
I don't know. I'm not sure
Yeah,
on it. They're
because it's
from
hard.
dentists, and they're pretty thoughtful about it, but I don't know.
Yeah, because I researched a lot of even the thoughtful flosses, and I'm like, why can't I get something that doesn't have even essential oils on it? Like, why do I need to add more chemicals for the flavoring? Why
Right.
can't we just get it blank? So if you could send me the link to that, I'd be very interested in.
I will find the answer out to you.
Yeah,
Non-toxic, plastic-free. Does say great tasting. Let's check on this. It's not a
yeah,
big deal, man.
yeah,
Yeah, no, the soap thing is big. I tell guys all the time, like,
yeah,
dude, you can't like, a lot of guys don't understand this, and I probably talked about it on the podcast, but you buy the Old Spice,
yeah,
whatever, and it's, coconut, peppermint, scented. Like those are artificial fragrances.
yes.
And you're
Those
just
aren't
taking
natural.
these hormone disrupting artificial fragrances and you're rubbing them right on your testosterone producing centers. Like I remember a funny one, Ben Greenfield, he's like a health guy. He's like, I went into the Olympic training facility, I went into their bathrooms, and it's like all the guys have like hormone disruptors like just sitting on their shelves. And it's like
Yeah.
you're trying to be the best athlete in the world and you're rubbing a hormone disruptor right on your genitals where all your testosterone is made. And it's
Or
illegal
in
for
the
you to take any exogenous testosterone. So like you need all the testosterone you can get. Um, so yeah, I mean, you gotta be thoughtful about the soaps that you use.
yeah. And now you're just talking about one aspect of this whole thing. Now imagine this in relation to salt, in relation to the water we're drinking. A lot of people are buying bottled water,
Oh yeah,
but
yep.
what they don't realize is not coming from springs. It's just purified tap water. And when you purify tap water, it's distilled, and distilled water doesn't taste good, so they need to add back chemicals to give it its taste again. And so you're paying money for tap water with chemicals. Like people, yeah, and so it goes really deep. And I could talk about it forever, but it would take too long to help somebody really understand the extent of what they need to do to find something that is good. So I just put together this book. Again, I'm not charging it because I want it to be accessible. And it's kind of tough. We can talk about it and people can understand that they need to shift, but very few people do. So it's kind of sad.
All right, Cam, I'm gonna go a little bit of not necessarily rapid fire, but I want you to maybe talk about some of the other books that you've written. As
Sure.
soon as I search you on Amazon, the speed reading book comes up. It has 3,700 reviews, man. So that's no
Yeah.
joke. This probably is one of the best-selling speed reading books, I would guess.
Yeah.
Talk to me
Uh,
about speed reading. That
yeah.
I
So
love
that
to read, but I don't think I'm a particularly fast reader.
so that book has 3,700 reviews just in the US. In the international market, it's got about another 1,500 reviews. So over 5,000 reviews on that book, and majority of them are 5 and 4 stars.
Yeah, yeah, very
Now,
highly rated.
you can't fake that. Like, if you have 100 stars, and you can get a lot of people to write reviews for you, but you can't fake that.
You're talking to an Amazon guy, so I know that is very challenging to get
Yeah.
that, on anything, let alone a book.
Yeah. So the reason I wanted to stress that is because that book can double to triple a person's reading speed in a matter of minutes. And it may seem like that's impossible, especially for a person who struggles with reading, but it is not only possible, but the reviews validate it. And the way I can deliver that is because our eyes already have the ability to read fast. It's just that we weren't taught to do it that way. We were first taught to read letters and how to combine letters to form words and how to combine words to form phrases, but we were never taught how to take it a step above to read multiple words at a time. And in fact, it's actually easier and more natural for your mind to do it that way. And the
Hmm.
reason why that is I'm going to ask you and your audience to just look up from your computer and just notice everything around you. You might notice the tables, the television, if you're in a bedroom, the beds, and everything. Your mind processes that in an instant. It's not going, well, that object over there has 4 legs and a top, flat top, so it must be a table.
Mhm.
Or that thing on the wall, it's black and there's a remote next to it, so it must be a TV. Nope. You point your eyes in a direction, and your brain instantly sees and understands. And I thought, why couldn't we do that with words? And I found that we can. It's just that we weren't taught to. You can actually look at text and both mentally see and process it simultaneously, just like everything else, and do it very rapidly. And so that's what I have in that book. And then my next popular book is Mind Mapping, which has 1,500 combined reviews on Amazon over.
Yep, yep.
And
Mind mapping, improve
yeah,
memory, concentration, communication, organization, creativity, and time management.
yeah. So with one tool, we can improve all those areas. And the book talks about that as well. So,
What's mind mapping? Give me the 101.
okay. So it's good that you asked because a lot of times when people think of mind mapping, they think some sort of like mind technique, but it's really just a note-taking technique.
Okay.
That differs from the traditional way that we take notes. So traditionally, we write notes line by line, starting from the top and working down. With mind maps, we don't start at the top, we start in the center. And
Mm,
instead of working down, we expand out like a spider web.
okay.
And the reason that works so well is because it mimics the way our brain works. So all of our thoughts and ideas aren't floating aimlessly in our heads. They're all connected to each other like a spider web, which is why anytime we have a thought or idea, it triggers a host of other thoughts, memories, and ideas, and those will trigger even more. And when we note information like a mind map, we're noting it in ways that mimic how the brain works. So we start with the idea in the center, and
Mm.
then we create branches with related ideas. And from each branch, we create sub branches that go even further. And it makes it much easier to not only learn, but to remember and to recall information. And
So is
that's a
that
real, go
that's
ahead.
like that's actually how you would draw it on the page? Like if I'm sitting in a meeting, I'm gonna draw maybe a central idea, and then I'm gonna draw sub ideas and go
Yeah.
on out further.
Yeah. So, for example, let's say you're in a
Mm.
meeting and you're talking about um, a promotion that you're going to run. So you would just type in the promotion in the center, and then from the branches, you could, for one branch, you could create a team branch, And then under team, you would list the people working on that promotion. And then for another branch, you could list something to the challenges. And then you can create sub branches with the various challenges that are going to come up with that promotion.
Hmm.
For the third branch, you can list vendors or whoever. And so it keeps information organized. So like information stays together and unlike stays separate, which makes it easier for the brain to not only process, but to work through it.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's actually pretty cool. So both the speed reading book and the mind mapping are going to be really helpful for people right now with AI. The reason I say that is now we're just got to learn more information. We're going to need to start pivoting from what we're doing because AI is taking over more and more jobs. And it's not easy, especially using the traditional methods that we were taught, to learn, pick up, apply, and internalize skills and behaviors. And these books that I've written are going to be really key.
Interesting. Talk to me about memory. I feel like my memory's okay, but it's not perfect.
Yeah. So if your memory is not perfect, it's kind of a good thing because
Your
brain is
mind
built-
is supposed to get rid of memories over time.
Yeah. And unfortunately, people think they have to have a good memory because that's what we were conditioned from growing up. It's like they threw us in school and said, you got to remember this. And if you didn't remember it, then you weren't as good.
You're not smart, right? There's almost like an association between memory and smart, right?
Exactly.
And if somebody memorized, how many yards are in a mile, you're like, ooh, Cam's smart. And it's like, well, maybe, not necessarily.
Exactly. And it damages us a lot. It like really affects us because it does condition that we're either not smart and then they also condition this link that smart means success. So you can't be successful without being smart. And so a lot of people think because they're not smart or they didn't do well in school, they can't be successful. And it's kind of unfortunate. But so this book starts with the premise that the brain is built to forget and it's actively making us forget. And it doesn't remember information based on how important and valuable it is. So a lot of us are walking around thinking when we receive information, we think it's like, it's so amazing, it's so important that I can't possibly forget. But that's not the criteria the brain uses to decide if we're going to record information. And so this book teaches people how to work within the limitations of how the brain likes to take in and process information. Because if we can present information in ways the brain is built to take in and process, we're going to increase our chances of remembering it. Now, these people that we call smart, their brains naturally just work that way. So it's not that they have some capability. Their brain just works in a way that takes in information the way it's designed to. But if we can use the same methods, we can operate just as well and even better than the people that we call smart and genius. It's just a matter of understanding how the brain works. And so there's a lot of cool techniques that can help people to retain a lot more information than they think is possible. But what I really want to stress about memory is that a lot of the reasons people aren't as successful as they want to be really comes down to memory. And what I mean by that is that when we want to do something, we have to remember that we made a commitment to do it. And then there's also steps along the way that we need to remember. Most people are forgetting those things. And as a result, they're not making the progress. And the way the brain works is that it doesn't remind us in the moment that we have the time or ability
that
to
we're prepared to do it, right? When you're sitting at the desk about to start writing, your brain doesn't go, all right, now remember, you need to write 3 chapters today.
Exactly. Or when it's time to go to the gym, our brain will remind us when we're in the middle of a meeting, but not when the workday is ended and we're getting into our car. That's not when it reminds us. So memory is really big to our success and goals. And if we're relying on our brains to remember things for us, then we're going to really limit ourselves. In fact, we need to really understand how the brain works and how the memory process is the memory function of our brain is to be as effective as you want, whether it's professionally as an entrepreneur or even in that one guy who retired and just wants to have a good life. So
So give me an example of something bigger, right? You said, you know, fitness. Let's say I want to be successful in business, right? And you say my memory is actually part of the problem, that I made commitments to do certain things. I'm thinking of certain things that I've committed to do with different brands and people that it's like, I can't, haven't really finished that thing out.
yeah.
Um, Maybe
And you probably
give me an example of how I would work to improve that.
so I'll give an example of where a lot of people are struggling is there's a lot of entrepreneurs who don't even have a calendar,
Hmm.
which boggles my mind. Like there's a level of growth that's just not possible if you don't have a calendar where you're booking your appointments, you're booking your to dos and tasks and things like that. And if you're not booking that, the brain can't remember as much as it normally would. And because it can't remember, it limits how much commitment you make.
Okay. Yep.
But if a person can have a calendar where all their meetings that they set up is on the calendar, so every morning they look at the calendar to know for that day what meetings they have, what appointments they need to go to, what tasks they need to be doing, and then bam, they know what they need to be doing, and then they can actually do it. And with a calendar, you can book it out months, weeks in advance. So the brain isn't worrying, hey, I don't want to commit to this because I don't know if I'll remember it or if I'll have time in a month. But if you put it on the calendar, the brain doesn't have to worry about it because it knows it's on the calendar. And as long as we make the commitment to review our calendar on a regular basis, like for me, I review my calendar every evening so I know what I'm going to do the next day. And then every morning to make sure that it's reinforced, which is why I was able to show up on this podcast on a Sunday at 10 a.m. If I tried to remember it on my own, I would have been like, oh, it's Sunday, I don't got to do anything, and I would have likely missed it.
Hmm.
And right now I'm getting on a lot of podcasts. So I'm doing about 5 podcasts a week.
Mm.
And if I was trying to remember all of that on my head, I would probably wouldn't be booking that much because my brain would have just been like, I don't know what podcast I've already booked to. I'll have to get back to you to see if the schedule works. But now I can literally just book as many because I don't have to worry about whether it'll get lost in my head or not because I have it on the calendar and I have a system of reviewing it.
Mm.
So I hope this is one example. I think it's a big one. I don't think people realize how important a calendar is if you're not an entrepreneur. But I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs I meet who actually don't have a calendar. And they're not doing as well as they could, which isn't a surprise.
Hmm. So exporting the memory function to something that won't forget, like a calendar.
Exactly. But then you got to still take another step. So um, we're living in a time where there's just a lot more information coming at us. I heard someone saying, forget if I read it or someone was saying it. And if the person was saying it, were they quoting something that they read? But the amount of information that we receive in a day or a week is what is the kind of information we would receive in a year about 100 years ago.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
You
So
were talking about a distraction-free life, and I was imagining, if we lived in a cabin in the woods, or we lived like on the prairie where the next closest person's 2 miles away, there's no
yeah,
electricity. It's like there aren't many distractions, you
there's
know?
no, yeah. And so as a result, there isn't a lot of information flooding our brain that is overloading our memory. And so this is kind of interesting. I forgot where I was going with this, but we are getting a lot more information in. What was the question that you asked? So I can.
Well, one point that I'll make here is you talk about just the flood of information around us at all times. And I don't actually think that more information is the person who ends up winning, right? Like if you're all day on ChatGPT, Googling business advice and things like
Yeah,
that, you're not necessarily going to beat me in business. What I have heard people say is it's all about your ability to decipher which information applies to you,
yeah,
right? Like, because there's one guy who's saying you have to take private equity money, like that's the only way to grow your business and do $1 billion exit. And then there's another guy saying like private equity is going to ruin your business. So it's like,
Yeah.
well, both things are technically true,
True.
but you have to decide what information applies to you and when
Yeah.
you need to apply the information, right?
Yeah. Okay. Now I remember is we want to take, so the reason I said that is we're coming across a lot more information. So yeah, our brain can remember a lot, but you don't want it to remember everything.
Mhm.
You want to be strategic about what you use your brain to remember and what you put outside of your brain, like on a notepad or
Mhm.
on an app or on a calendar.
Mhm.
But we're getting to a point where it's just important to start putting more and more information outside and have a
Mhm.
system of reviewing it. Because the biggest thing is reviewing, because a lot of people will take that step to take that step to take notes and all of that, but then they won't review their notes,
Yeah.
or they won't review their calendar, or they won't review their to-dos. And so it it doesn't really do much if we're not reviewing. So it's really about regularly reviewing and coming back to things. And about you saying is not the person who has the most information, it's what they or how they use it. Um, we can also say it's taking action on the information and consistent action. But we can't take consistent action if we forget the information that we learned. So just because we learned something doesn't mean that it'll stay. And so we want to make sure we keep coming back to that information so we can be consistent in taking action on it. And I'll just give a good example. I'm into personal development. I have coaches myself. I actually have several coaches. I go to events and seminars and things of like that nature, and I get a lot of good advice. But what I found is historically, I would get great advice and I'd be like, oh, yeah, this is going to be great. Once I put into practice, boom, it'll be effective. But then a few days or weeks later, I'd completely forgot what the
Yeah,
advice was
definitely.
or that I even learned it.
Yeah.
That's even the more crazy part. And so things that I want to integrate into my being or that I want to make sure I'm consistent with are on my notes that I read every morning. So, in addition to my calendar, my to do list is read through these notes that I want to make sure is on the top of my awareness, and I do it every morning.
Mhm.
So I'm constantly being reminded of it, and when I'm constantly being reminded of it, I can be more consistent. So this is what I meant. How much memory affects our own productivity. People don't realize it, but it's really huge.
Yeah, we need to be reminded more often than we need to be taught, right?
Yes, that's what it is. That's really what it is.
Yeah. Okay, last one. Do you wanna do, concentration or positive, self-talk? I guess it doesn't say positive self-talk, it just says self-talk.
Yeah, self-talk, your way to success, I should say, right?
Yeah. Which one do you wanna cover?
They're both really good. I'm going to cover both, and I'll tell you why. So, concentration is my proudest work.
Mm.
It was the book that I spent the most time on, and it really goes deep into the mind and what's going on internally. And the premise of that book is more or less that the challenge with where we are and where we want to go isn't with the outside world. It's what's going on internally. It's thoughts saying that you're not good enough. It's feelings making it seem like things aren't possible. It's our mind kind of skipping and jumping to different wants and desires, so we can't stick with something long enough to do it. It's all internal. And I really think it's one of the best books that we could be reading for our time,
Mm.
because we are living in a time where we're overly stimulated. So it's overly stimulating our interactivity, which is keeping us from being able to stick with things for long term. And then externally, we just have so much distractions that is pulling us in all these different ways. And this book takes a very different look at concentration, because what I found with other books, they were focusing things on cutting out distractions, turning off notifications, and things of that nature, as if that was our problem. But that isn't the only part of our problem. There's so much more going on. And I think it's one of the deepest looks and dives into the topic. And again, I spent the most time on it. And I'll even go as far as to say, when you look at a lot of these people who are at the echelon of success, they talk about how concentration was the most important thing that
Mm,
helped them get there. And what I've noticed in being in the purview of the personal development space is that every few years, someone comes out with a book or a concept claiming it to be the secret of success and growth
mm,
and,
right.
and whatever. You know, there was The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. There was that book by Grit, saying the people who have grit have it.
Read
Well, I
that one.
would
Good
say,
one. Yeah.
yeah. And I would say it's concentration
Yeah.
because without
Cal
concentration,
Newport, Deep Work, right? It's kind of
yeah,
along that vein.
yeah. And although I would say my book's better than his.
Well, I read Deep Work, so I'll have to read yours.
Yeah. Yeah, I would love it if you could and just let me know. Because, of course I'm biased, but nothing against Cal. I don't say this I say this only in a joking way. But concentration is the most important skill that we can develop
Mm,
because without concentration, we can't develop any other skills.
right.
We can't focus on it to develop the certain skills we need, the business skills to be able to stick with things and all of that. So that is my proudest work. Now, the reason I kind of had paused, like which book should I choose between self talk and concentration, is because I think self talk is one of the most fundamental things that we humans need to be doing. There, it again, when we look at people at the echelon of success, The Rock, Oprah Winfrey, Serena Williams, they all talk about how self talk was instrumental in their success.
Hmm.
And a lot of times when people hear self talk, they think affirmations. They're kind of similar, but there's a distinction. Affirmations can be done many ways. You can write the affirmation, you could put it on a post it and look at it, and things of that nature. But self talk, I use that word deliberately, but it's the action of talking out that affirmation. And it could be talked out in your head or you can be done out loud, though out loud is better. And
Hmm.
it's one of the easiest and simplest ways to make changes and move forward in our life. That's because when we repeat a certain statement, those words, they're actually quite powerful. They seep into our mind
Mm-hmm.
and they start to create our outcome. And if we can change our words, we can move ourselves in a direction much more easily without having to put so much effort and force. And self talk can be done so many ways. For example, recently I took up dancing. Now, I'm not a guy with a lot of rhythm or any rhythm. I have two left feet and all of that. So, dancing was a struggle. So, I created a set of self talk statements of really the outcome that I wanted. So, now I repeat every day I'm an excellent dancer. I learn and pick up moves easily. I remember all the moves and execute them with precision and control. I maintain correct posture, frame, connection, and hand position throughout the dance. I have rhythm and soul. I confidently and smoothly move my body and partner to the rhythm and beat of the music. Repeating this helped me improve my dancing phenomenally. I just went to a salsa bachata social last night, and I had many follows telling me how good my dancing was.
Hmm.
And I don't think I could have got it to that level without the self talk.
Mm.
And one of the things I also struggled with was speaking. I was never the best communicator. In fact, I struggle with communicating both verbally and written. In fact, English isn't my native language. I immigrated here and I didn't have a lot of support in learning English. And because I had a lot of inner activity, I wasn't able to focus. I was daydreaming most of childhood. So I didn't pick up the language. But I would say right now, I'm fairly decent in communicating my thoughts and ideas. I don't really stutter, stammer, say a lot of ahs and ums and you knows as I would historically. It was so bad that what I wanted to say would be far different from what actually came out of my mouth.
Mm.
And as a result, I didn't speak too much. And as a result, I didn't develop the ability to communicate and it actually got worse. So when I really wanted to start getting on more podcasts, I'm like, this is an area I need to work on. So I started with self talk. This is
Mm.
a statement that I repeat every day. I'm an excellent communicator. I easily communicate my thoughts, ideas, feelings, experiences, and more. I can write about and verbalize anything. I'm never at a loss for words because the right words come to me quickly and easily.
Hmm.
Now, from where I was, I feel like I am night and day, and I do attribute it to self-talk. And these are just small areas that I'm using self-talk. I have a lot of statements that I repeat for different areas that I want to work on. And I really think it's really one of the best places where we can start when we want to do something. When we have a goal or we decide a direction we want to go, think about the outcome that we're seeking, put it into statements that clearly um, hone in on that, and then repeat it regularly. And you'd be surprised at how much easier the shifts are when we start with self talk.
Well, no, I believe it because this is something that they found out long ago with propaganda, right? If
Yeah.
you repeat something often enough, then people begin to think it's true. I mean,
Yes.
look at a statement like "Make America Great Again." Like, I don't know if that actually means anything, but when you repeat it often enough, now people scream it at a rally, and they'll be like,
Yes.
"Yeah, we are making America great." It's like, well, when was it great? When are we
Yeah.
like, what point are we trying to return back to exactly?
Yeah.
But it is one of those things you repeat it often enough, and people begin to believe it. And if you repeat something often enough to yourself, maybe you can begin to believe it.
Yeah. Yeah. So this book gives a very good structured framework for it. Words are powerful. They just go in, and whether they come from you or someone else, it does influence us. And we can't always control words of others, but we can control our own words. And I highly, highly, highly recommend this as a starting point for anything that you want to do.
Awesome, Cam. Brother, I really appreciate you. This is some fantastic information. Uh, KamKnight.com, KamKnight.com. But where else can people check you out and buy some of the books and stuff?
Yeah, so I had got 3 free gifts for you guys, for the listeners here. The first book is called 3 free guides. The first guide is called Prompt Engineering for Your Brain. People don't realize, but the brain was the original ChatGPT.
Mm,
And there's a mechanism that works similar to ChatGPT where you can ask it questions and it gives answers, and it also helps you do things. And so you can get that free guide on how to engineer your brain to move you in the direction you want more easily. The second guide is End Procrastination and Sabotage. So we talked about the concept of internal resistance. That's where procrastination and sabotage come from. And it's a really deep dive look into that. And the third guide is called Beat Burnout. And we're in a time where there's just everyone's just a lot more overextended,
mhm.
and people are burning out. And I kind of go into the psychology of where burnout is stemming from and what they can do to get over it. They can get all 3 of those on my website at kamknight.com, KamKnight.com. And if they want to work with me one-on-one, I have developed a technique that helps people go into their unconscious mind, and we work on their resistance at the unconscious level.
Mm.
It's much quicker and much more lasting than anything that's out there. And they could email me at mentor@kamknight.com.
Beautiful, man. Thank you. I'll attach links to your books. I'll attach link to your website, and really appreciate it, man. It's fantastic. Thank you, Cam.